speaking. And then we'll have Wendy give our keynote. And then after Wendy, Caleb, who raised his hand right now, will give our second phase of our keynote. Wendy's with the Drug Policy Forum and
Medical Cannabis Coalition.
And the Medical Cannabis Coalition. Caleb and Dana, the owner, I'm very grateful is here tonight, thank you, from Steep Hill, Hawaii, which is where we can take our medicines to get tested to make sure that they're healthy and safe. Depending on what level of testing you want, they can tell you the potency, which is always good to know. And also, I think much more valuable is the heavy metals, the biological, the insecticides, pesticides, herbicides. And Caleb will get into all that. I don't even pretend to know it all. But I can tell you that I certainly get my medicine tested there, and I wouldn't want to recommend that anyone do anything different than go to Steep Hill and get their medicine tested. On behalf of the Honolulu Club, thank you so much. I've been a member here since '85, and they've been very gracious. This is basically one of the first times a mainstream club has let an event like this happen on their property. And I can tell you it was no easy task, as I thought it would be, but then it became very easy when I found out all the staff here, all the members, and all the management team were very, very, very encouraging to do this here tonight. So that 1 week card is really valuable. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and the microphone-ish to Rustin.
How's it going? My name is Rustin Smith. I'm the owner of Smokey's Pipe and Coffee. Sarah and Ron, if you guys want to hand out, we have like little gift bags. It's got a lighter, a coupon, some beeline if you're familiar with it, some papers. So I'm going to go ahead and read my cards here so I don't wing it. So Smokey's Pipe and Coffee was created to be a clean and approachable space that would educate the public and enhance the accessibility of the products that are there, helping to support and progress the legal cannabis industry. By putting a smoke shop inside of a coffee shop, our hope was to marry two industries. One that in the past has been criminalized and undermined with another that is the most socially acceptable and successful business on the planet. Our concept is progressive as we incorporate not only cannabis, but also kratom, kava, and other natural products into the popular coffee shop model. That is Smokey's Pipe and Coffee. Today I have a selection over here in the back of vaporizers and other products for display and discussion. If you're interested in learning about the options for vaping flour, wax, and oil. Enjoy the Smokey's merchandise, and please stop in to check out our shop at 1010 University Avenue or follow our social media at Smokey's HI to stay connected to what's new as we are constantly evolving with the industry. Don't forget the free coffee and kava coupon inside the gift bag. And thank you for your support, and we will be in the back at the table to answer any of your questions we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your help. I was just there earlier today. One of my clients from the Big Island flew and I picked her up at the airport, took her to the dispensaries, and then to Smokey's, where she was very happy to actually purchase the exact one you'll be giving away as the door prize. The grand door prize is a G-Pen Elite. Is that right? Is that right?
The G-Pen Elite?
Yes, it's amazing. And yeah, that's how sleek is that? And actually, you take your herb, you put it into the device, and it vaporizes it. Wow. So someone's going to win that tonight. Okay, next, I would like to have Helen from Aloha Green, our sponsor for tonight's event, to come on up and say a bit about Aloha Green and their amazing mission.
My name's Helen. I'm one of the directors at Aloha Green. It's the dispensary that opened up on King, like Keomoku. We were the first on Oahu to open. We also had the highest score with the application. I don't want to talk too long because I know you've got two keynote speakers, but we are so proud, and we're proud and honored to sponsor and partner with Dr. Klink and to do programs like this where it creates more education for the community. I know that this workshop is mostly it's general knowledge about cannabis, so I'll be available after, and I guess will there be breaks?
There's probably a big break between when you get.
I'll be available if you guys have any specific questions about the dispensary, any questions you have about getting a card, product pricing. I'll be available for that. So thanks.
Square because I go there too often. I don't think there's such thing as too often. So, our keynote speaker tonight, Wendy Gibson, the go-to woman for knowledge regarding cannabis. Remember, we'll have breaks between the speakers and we'll have some time afterwards to ask any questions from anyone here. Rustin and his team really know a lot about vaporizing, and when I'm always talking to my patients about ideally not smoking the medicine and not putting the smoke in your lungs, and I always try to lean towards vaporizing the buds. They have the devices right over there. They're much more affordable than you imagine, and Rustin was explaining to us earlier today the actual, how do you say the percentages? Vaping is a really good way to do the medicine.
Oh yeah, they were saying that 5-6 years ago, they're saying that when you roll a joint and you smoke a pipe, you're using about 26 to 28% of the product. So if you reach in your ounce and grab out 75% of it and throw it away. If you use a water pipe, you're getting about 80%, just because it's all enclosed. And then with the vaporizer, you're getting about 96%. So it's a lot better for you.
It's a very efficient way of doing your medicine, and it's much better on your lungs, in my own personal experience. So that's very important, and I can't wait to talk about Steep Hill and their ability to test the medicine. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Wendy for the presentation, overview of medical cannabis, which I like to call Cannabis 101.
Thank you. Fabulous. Great.
Aloha kako. Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I do appreciate it because I'm on a mission to teach people as much as they want to know about how their own body works and how cannabis, the medicine, works. And I've been on a mission for about 3 years to do that. And so I put together an educational program, and I'm happy to show it to anybody who will sit still for an hour and a half. I cut my educational program a little bit shorter tonight, but it is really chock full of information, so please put on your seatbelt, sit back, and put your cell phones on stun. If you do have questions, please hold them until the end. And I brought some resources for you to learn more. They're over on the table there, and please help yourself to any of the handouts that I have over there on that table. I'm an RN, BSN, and ACNA, which is American Cannabis Nurses Association member, and Paul is also one of those. I need to tell you who I work for, which is Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii and also the Medical Cannabis Coalition of Hawaii. The Drug Policy Forum has been around for about 21 years trying to shape Hawaii's drug laws. We worked on getting, our vision is a just society where drug laws are based on science and compassion and also looking out for public safety and health. Harm reduction projects that we worked on were decriminalization of all drugs. We haven't been successful at getting a decriminalization bill passed yet, but we did get a drug paraphernalia law passed last year. I don't know if you know, but we had one of the harshest drug paraphernalia laws of any state, a felony to own anything under the heading of paraphernalia, which included testing and growing supplies. So we got it changed from a felony crime to a civil fine up to $500 and no criminal record. So we also worked on needle exchange, getting naloxone, which is the antidote for opioid overdoses, into the hands of as many people who might be witnessing opioid overdoses. They also were instrumental in bringing the medical cannabis program to Hawaii in 2000, and they created the Medical Cannabis Coalition of Hawaii to provide a support network for patients and caregivers and for medical professionals. And so the Medical Cannabis Coalition works primarily on improving the medical cannabis program here. And Drug Policy Forum works on broader drug issues. The Drug Policy Forum created this guide. There's a copy for you over there if you want. It's also online, and there's instructions on how to look at it online over there. This is a guidebook of Hawaii's drug laws so that everyone can stay within the confines of the laws. Who I am, why I care. I became an American Cannabis Nurse Association nurse about 3 years ago at a medical cannabis convention where it was 3 days of learning about the medicine and how it works. And I signed a pledge that I would go out in the world and train as many healthcare professionals as I could, and so I created my educational program. The American Cannabis Nurses Association believes that whole plant medicine is superior to any of the single synthetic substances that are on the market, such as the 100% THC or the 100% CBD. We believe that whole plant medicine is what we want to do. I do need to also let you know that even though I am a healthcare professional and a cannabis nurse educator, I do not dispense medical advice, legal advice, or dietary advice. And I don't endorse any cannabis products or businesses or healthcare providers. That would be a conflict of interest for me because I'm a lobbyist. I encourage all patients to consult with their primary care providers and their health team for advice, for medical advice. I do not give out medical advice. But I can share my own experiences with working with patients. I can share with you what I have learned over the last 3 years and share with you some of the struggles that I've seen patients going through. It's pretty important. It's important. Sorry about that. To understand the terminology. What is marijuana? How is it different from cannabis? As well as how does it work? I think it's hugely important that not only healthcare professionals understand how their own bodies work so that they can help patients, but patients understand how their own bodies work with this medicine. So I am going to cover some of the science of that. Talk a little bit about how whole plant medicine is different from the CBD that we're seeing for sale all over the place from hemp, or the pharmaceutical versions of that. I can't talk a lot about dosing because of legal constraints, but I can tell you a little bit about it. There also can share with you the legal medical uses in the United States, which go back 87 years worth. As well as looking at some of the research that is available. We keep being told there's not enough research. Well, there's over 28,000 studies that have been done on this plant, and I'll share just a tiny bit of those with you. There have been some that have been done on safety as well as effectiveness. And because this is November and Epilepsy Awareness Month, this presentation is tailored to looking at how it has been used to treat epilepsy patients. And like I said, I have some resources over there if you want to learn more about this. But mostly what I hope that you take away from this is that cannabis can be a safe and effective medicine when used properly. It can be used for treating epilepsy and chronic pain, possibly replacing some of the more harmful substances that patients are using now. I do like to emphasize that I'm a proponent of whole plant medicine and not of the single synthetic pharmaceutical substitutes. And there is a huge need to remove it from the Schedule I drug category, and I'll explain a little bit about what that is as well. So what is marijuana, and then how is that different from cannabis? Marijuana is a racially charged slang term that came out of the 1930s. It was targeting Mexican immigrants, and it was possibly derived from a Portuguese word for intoxication, marihuana. So cannabis is the botanical name, it's the name of the plant, it is the historical name of the medicine, and we just passed a bill so that everybody knows that, Senate bill. So everything on the Department of Health's website and literature should now say cannabis, not marijuana. the unfertilized female plants produce the best medicine. So they are formed on these tiny mushroom stalks. It's a resinous stalk. These are called trichomes. And so the female plants produce the best trichomes. So a single male plant can ruin your whole crop by pollinating it and turning it to seeds. This is cannabis oil. Although it is in a syringe, it is not for injection. But because it is fat-based, it has to be extracted using either another oil or a solvent to do that, such as alcohol. Many, many routes of administration. This one is set up for oral dosing, but that can mean many things. It's not just creating an edible out of it. It could be something as simple as putting it under your tongue or rubbing it on your gums. There are also, it's useful in feeding tubes. There are transdermal patches that can go through the skin to treat pain. There are suppositories that can be used both rectally and vaginally. There are inhalers, there's gums, there are many, many things. But I encourage people, if you're going to use an oil that's been extracted using a solvent, don't use any of the toxic solvents. It's generally accepted that there are two kinds of cannabis that are medicinal. That's cannabis sativa and cannabis indica. This is not a hard, fast rule, and we're discovering that this is not something that we can really rely upon to determine what effects that a certain strain or chemovar is going to have. If you watch Sanjay Gupta's movie called Weed, you saw Charlotte's Web. So the general difference between a sativa and an indica is really the shape of the plant. So sativas grow into tall trees up to 20 feet and has the leaves that look like what you see when you look at an image that you think of as marijuana leaf or cannabis leaf. The indicas are shorter, shrubbier, and their leaves tend to be a little bit more bunchier like that as well. So there's over 2,000 varieties or hybrids, so we can't use, most of them are not pure sativa or pure indicas. This is the general thinking, though, behind it, that sativas are daytime medicine, indicas nighttime medicine, and there is some truth to that. So people that get high using sativas say that it's a head high. People that use indicas say it's more of a body buzz. So when you're looking at what you're treating, you can kind of steer towards the style that will be looking more at whether or not it's affecting something in your head versus the rest of your body. So understanding how it works, you need to understand that there are hundreds of chemicals at play here, and I'll only talk about two major classes of them. The first one is called cannabinoids. And can anybody say cannabinoid? Don't be annoyed, it's a cannabinoid. Who can say that? Cannabinoid. I worked in pharmacy for 10 years. I had to learn how to say the name of all the chemicals, and I think it's very important that we understand that, yeah. So who said cannabinoid? Okay, would you give him a prize, please? There's no quiz at the end, but there are prizes if you say something. Okay, so the major cannabinoids that you probably already know something about, THC and CBD. THC being the psychoactive one, CBD being it is actually psychoactive, but the non-intoxicating one. Well, there are many forms of THC. If you were to pick a leaf of a plant, just the raw form is not psychoactive. If you ate that leaf or you juiced it, it is THCA. It's only when it's heated or aged that it becomes the THC psychoactive form. And there are also many forms of CBD, but CBD is thought to buffer the effects of THC. The other class of chemicals are called terpenes, and if you know anything about aromatherapy or essential oils, you already know something about the terpenes. They're found in all fruits, flowers, plants, trees. It's what gives them their distinct flavors and aromas. And They are on the generally recognized as safe list by the FDA for ingestion. Many of these have therapeutic value, and I'll let you read that other part. So when you get products from dispensaries, they are tested and labeled. They have percentages of the cannabinoids on them. Some of them may also have terpenes on them, I hope, because those are important. But this is really important to have to help with dosing, to know what's in it, how much THC, CBD, and also some of the other cannabinoids that have therapeutic value. But we want to know that we're getting quality products that don't have contaminants in them. And so I'm really thrilled that we've got dispensaries and labs to provide good quality products to patients. So a lot of people think, well, why don't we just use CBD? Well, THC has a lot of therapeutic uses. It's not to be discarded. It has, there are different forms of it that work for seizure modulation. It's hugely important for pain and inflammation and for sleep, for tumor suppression, and it also has some antibiotic properties against methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus or MRSA. You can get too much THC and have an unpleasant effect on you, but you can possibly use terpenes to help reverse that. There are terpenes in black pepper that can help bring somebody back out of a bad experience with THC. And citrus can also have a similar effect, only not as prominent. CBD's therapeutic uses include seizure control, and there is a patent on it as a neuroprotective agent, useful in minimizing damage from ischemic stroke, and also useful in the treatment of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and HIV dementias. So the NFL is hugely interested in conducting research for concussive injuries. So there are many mechanisms of action that CBD work on to control seizures. It helps keep your body from breaking down your body's own THC. It can change modulation of different chemicals in your body, including calcium and potassium and glutamate, which all are neuroirritants. So if you're getting CBD from hemp, it's different from getting from the other kind of, they're both cannabis sativa, just to be confusing. I'm pretty sure. So the CBD oil that you get from hemp is cannabis sativa. The CBD rich strains are also cannabis sativa. But the main differences are whether or not they have low resin or high resin. So the CBD that you get from hemp is low in THC, but it's also low in terpenes. Because the hemp plant is not a rich source of CBD, you need a lot of product to do that, and you possibly need a solvent to extract it. Hemp is a bioremediator, meaning it sucks the toxins out of the soil when it's growing. So it's great for cleaning up soil, but maybe not so great if you're concentrating that oil and trying to use it as a medicine. So unless you have independent lab testing that goes with your CBD oil, I wouldn't know which one to recommend to you. So if you get the high resin CBD rich flower concentrates from the dispensaries, that's a different story. These products are tested, labeled, again, they're high in THC, averaging about 12%. They are also rich in terpenes, depending on the extraction technique. They are hard to grow, so they're more difficult to get. But like I said, the products are tested for contaminants, and so this is more what I want to steer patients towards buying instead of the over-the-counter one. But both high doses of THC and CBD can interfere with medications that go through the liver and the kidneys. But it is legal in medical states. So CBD, studies from Israel showed that if you use a pure single CBD, just that has been purified, that the dosing on it kind of goes wacky. Whereas if you use a whole plant medicine, you can predict your effect a lot better. Whereas with the synthetic, you get like this bell-shaped curve. You get a result on the low end, you get no result in the middle, you get some different result on the other side of it. And it's very limited in how effective it is. Whereas you use whole plant medicine, you get a much more consistent effect, even with low dose, all the way up to a high dose. You can predict the responses better. This is a diagram I'm not going to get into any great depth, but just to show more about the many uses for CBD, which is the blue part on the top. And scientists have mapped out the routes that our body uses to create these effects. So you probably already know it's an anti-epileptic and neuroprotective, but did you also know it's useful as a bone stimulant for bone growth? And we know which pathways that they work on in the body to do that. So how does it work? So we've got the cannabinoids, you've got the terpenes, and they are working together. So it's what's called the Entourage Effect. So if you want to Google anything, you want to know more about this, go check out Entourage Effect. But what that means is that they're working synergistically or against each other in some cases. But these terpenes have therapeutic value. There's one called linalool, which if you've ever done any aromatherapy using lavender, you probably already know it helps with sleep. So it's also thought to be useful as an anticonvulsant. There's one called beta-carotene in black pepper, which is also thought to have some anticonvulsant properties. Pinene is actually an important one because it's a very common one, and it's a bronchodilator. It's also uplifting and gets into your head. Just like if you're walking through a pine forest, you might be more alert. It can also be responsible for side effects. So terpenes have therapeutic value, but they may also be responsible for a side effect called couch lock. And myrcene is a very common terpene, and it's found in mangoes and hops and lemongrass. If you drink a really hoppy beer, you know it's really sedating. Same kind of thing here. It's a muscle relaxant, and it's thought to be responsible for that side effect called couch lock, where a person gets locked down in the couch and has trouble getting back out again. Pinene, again, if it's combined with a high THC, is thought to lead to a worsening of anxiety when smoked. So I already talked about that. So dosing is very personalized. It's not something that your healthcare professional can really help you with. The people making the recommendations cannot discuss dosing with you because it is not an FDA-approved drug with distinct doses. But something that you should know, I think, is that cannabis can have a biphasic effect or can have triphasic effect, meaning one effect that you get at a very low dose, you get the exact opposite at the other end of the spectrum at a real high dose. It can also have triphasic, so it can have 3 different responses. But your healthcare provider is restricted from being able to discuss it with you. So, but as a cannabis nurse educator, I can tell you what is a high dose, what is a low dose, and just a general rule of thumb is that if you're starting out using it, you start with the lowest dose that you can, and you don't increase that dose until it's been over time, like weeks. So we have microdosing information some of the information that I've been able to gather, some of it's from the internet, like from Health Canada. They've got information for their healthcare providers. And you can also look at Project CBD. You can look at products that are already on the market and get an idea of what kind of doses are being used for prescription medications as well. So I'd like to emphasize that please remember that it is not one drug. This is hundreds of chemicals. We know how a good number of them work, and we know how they work together to some degree. This is a very new science, so we really don't have all the answers. But there's absolutely a growing consensus that the CBD-rich extracts alone are unlikely to provide adequate seizure control without THC added. And that can be the non-psychoactive form of THC, the THCA, it could be THCV, it could be other forms of THC, not necessarily the psychoactive one. So how does it work? Well, who knows that your body produces substances that are like opiates, right? Those are the endogenous opiates. Well, your body also produces cannabinoids. And because your body produces them, they're called endocannabinoids. We used to think that the runner's high was caused by the endogenous opiates, but now we think it's related to your body's endogenous endocannabinoids. Who can say cannabinoid?
Cannabinoids.
Oh, no, I know the prizes. Okay, thank you.
So this is one of 5 naturally occurring endocannabinoids, and it's called anandamide. It's very similar to THC. And anandamide means joy or bliss, and it's used for pain relief and causes euphoria. The other one is called 2-arachidonicglycerol, and fortunately has been abbreviated as 2AG because I can only say 2-arachidonicglycerol, whatever, too many, a few times. So anyway, 2AG. So we've got anandamide and 2AG. They are both synthesized from omega-3 and 6 fatty acids, so what you eat does matter. These act as neurotransmitters. They're present in mother's breast milk. We think that they're responsible for stimulating the newborn's appetite and rooting responses in sucking. They are also in early stages of embryonic development. So at 14 weeks, we see receptors, and at 20 weeks, there's activity in those receptors. We think it's very important, likely important in the maturation of both the immune system and the nervous system. So some of these, one of them is higher at night, one is higher during the day. We think it's controlling the sleep-wake cycle as well. So 2 main types of cannabinoid receptors, and there are more receptors for these in your body than any other receptor type. So it's really the master controlling system and helps explain why this medicine is useful for so many different conditions, because your body is wired for this. CBD1 receptors are found primarily in the central and peripheral nervous system. CB2 are found primarily in your immune system. THC binds to both of them. CBD does not bind to either well. So we also have a really unique neurotransmission system. So the basic transmission system of one neuron to the next neuron, you have, that's right, you've got here's how 2 neurons talk. You've got the first neuron firing off, and it goes through a gap and then hits the second neuron and causes the second neuron to release chemicals, which has an effect on a target tissue. Well, this works backwards. You have the first neuron firing, and instead of just triggering that second neuron, when it gets into that gap, your body produces the endocannabinoids, and it creates them in this gap from the postsynaptic neuron creates them, and it creates them where they're needed, when they're needed, in response to that initial neuron firing. So this can help explain how it works for treating epilepsy, because you have an erratic firing of that first neuron, and when it hits that gap, the second neuron turns around and says, oh no, 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 and buffers out that effect. There is a theory that people have endocannabinoid deficiencies and that we can be staying healthier by enhancing our endocannabinoid system, and there's a lot of literature on that online as well. But it's thought that you can enhance your endocannabinoid system with diet. Capsaicin stimulates the release of endocannabinoids, and also music, meditation. I don't have acupuncture on there, but that one as well. So this is keeping it simple. This is that presynaptic neuron. It fires. Postsynaptic neuron creates the chemicals. And this is very simplified because just as the chemicals are created, there's also a degradation cycle that happens too. Location, location, location matters, and it helps explain why no one has ever died of an overdose, because it can't shut down your breathing center, which is in your midbrain, because there are almost no receptors on that area. So unlike opiates, it can't shut down either your breathing or cardiac function. That being said, we know it's pretty safe for adults, but what about children? There were some children who ended up in the hospital after ingesting cannabis, and at least one ended up in ICU with breathing difficulties and over-sedated. We don't know if that was a contaminated product or if it was a drug-drug interaction with some other medication that they may have been on. This is a chart showing, you can win a prize on this one. This is toxic levels for different substances, both over-the-counter and illegal substances. And cannabis barely shows up as a tick on there. Scientists haven't actually found a lethal dose, except for, one study strapped gas masks on monkeys and pumped in enough smoke to asphyxiate them, essentially. So they came up with a formula. There's, if you can guess, how many pounds do you have to smoke in how many pounds do you have to smoke in how many minutes to die? Marcia Rose, I know you know this one. Okay, who wants to guess how many pounds?
40 pounds.
More than 40.
More than 40? Your body weight. Your body weight.
More than my body weight.
More than your body weight?
More than my body weight.
75.
A little less than that.
50 pounds.
65.
More. It's over 1,000.
Really?
Shit.
Yes, you can't win a prize if you don't guess. How much? 1,200, more than that. 1,500 pounds in
10 minutes? 10 minutes?
more than 10. Less than 30. 15. 1,500 pounds in 15 minutes. That's a telephone pole sized joint. You get the prize. You get a prize over here. Thank you. So safety has been established.
Where do you get that much?
So there are many government commissioned studies to look at the safety, and all of them came back saying very similar things. No, it does not cause insanity, does not cause physical mental health deterioration, criminal behavior. It is not a gateway drug, and it took us up until this year to get the DEA to remove that statement from their website. In '72, a similar commission came back saying, no, we need to end prohibition. And in 1988, a DEA judge was tasked with also looking at the safety, and he came back saying, well, when you look at what the safety is, you have to weigh out not just what the risk of using it versus the benefit, but look at the risk of letting the condition allow to progress. So does using it outweigh letting the disease continue to progress? And I'll let you read this part. So DEA judge felt it did not belong in a Schedule I drug, and he was dismissed. They just ignored him. So there are some safety concerns though. Just like any medication, it can have side effects, and you need to know what those are before you use them. It can have drug-drug interactions. Any drug that has a warning about eating grapefruit, that when it hits your liver, when you ingest this, it goes, your liver can, both CBD and THC can interfere with how your liver processes different drugs. And it can raise the levels of them, which in some instances might be good, because you might need less chemotherapy, you might need less anti-seizure medication, but you might need a lot closer monitoring with that. So if you're going to be using CBD oils or cannabis, I encourage you to work closely under medical supervision when you do that. It's especially with drugs that you need tight controls on. Yep.
Why the grapefruit?
Because of how it affects the cytochrome P450 enzyme system in your liver.
The grapefruit does.
Yes. So this is just a short list of possible side effects that people can have. People can pass out. People can get a condition called hyperemesis, which is cyclic vomiting, which we can look at this list and generally say the side effects are predictable, largely predictable, manageable, and generally go away over time with use. Really just depends on what you use and how fast. You can also, you probably know, it can reduce your blood pressure. That's why it's sometimes useful for glaucoma. But it could create a fall risk. As somebody who already has low blood pressure and you drop their blood pressure, that's not a good thing. So we have to be especially careful with elderly people who are at risk of falls. Also, because it can make your heart race. If you have a cardiac condition, that might not be a good thing either. So Dr. Carl Hart, one of my favorite doctors, he's an addiction specialist, he reminds us these adverse effects are within the range that is tolerated by most, for most FDA-approved medications, and they tend to dissipate with continued use. So cannabis was used as a medicine in the United States from 1850 to 1937. It was available in the drugstores of the time. It was whole plant medicine, powdered extracts, tinctures, concentrates, and they even had cigarettes for asthma. And records of medical use go back 5,000–10,000 years in other countries. It was in the United States Pharmacopoeia, you know that little USP on your medicines? Well, that's the pharmacist's drug manual. And cannabis was in the drug manual for 90 years. In 1851, the formulary uses included convulsive disorder, opiate addiction, and alcoholism, and neuralgia, nerve pain. Things that we are just now rediscovering that they were using it for in 1850. And these were made by major drug companies, Eli Lilly, Park-Davis Squibb, and they had them labeled as 10 milligram doses, and I don't really know how accurate their dosing was because we have trouble with that now. So everything was going well. What the heck happened? 1930s. Remember, this is when it changed from marijuana or cannabis to marijuana. You have to look at what was happening during this time. This was the economic depression. There was a shortage of jobs. Mexican immigrant workers were taking the jobs. Alcohol prohibition ended, and they had just formed this Federal Bureau of Narcotics who was rabid to prosecute. And so they changed their vision. They set their sights more on instead because they didn't have alcohol to regulate anymore. There was a lot of racism against Negroes also. These are statements that we pulled out of historical print. So William Randolph Hearst, who was a newspaper magnate of the time, decided he wanted to pioneer a media campaign, and so he had the newspapers to do that. So the stories that showed up were about Mexicans killing entire families after smoking marijuana. black men raping white women, and so it created this huge culture of fear, which was launched even more firmly into people's brains with Reefer Madness, the movie, which we think is pretty funny now, but back then it just really made people fear everything: addiction, brain damage, murder, violent crimes. And enough legislators were convinced that it was dangerous, and so they passed the Marijuana Stamp Tax Act, which made both sales of medicine and hemp pretty much illegal unless you bought one of these stamps, which cost quite a bit, $1 to $100 per ounce. This is back in 1937. That was a lot of money back then. And the government only issued a few of these and prosecuted people who did not have all of the paperwork and their stamp. The American Medical Association did oppose it, but they were drowned out by the industrialists who were replacing hemp with other things, and the pharmaceutical companies started coming into it. It was petrochemical companies as well. So 1970 was the final nail in the coffin when it was unscientifically and inappropriately placed in the Schedule I drug category. And to be in that category, this is the most dangerous drugs on the planet. They have a high potential for abuse, lacks any accepted medical use, and that's a key word, accepted. Only FDA can approve the accept drugs as drugs. Cannot be used safely, even under medical supervision. So we know pretty much it doesn't meet any one of these criteria, but it is considered to be one of the most dangerous drugs. And again, racism reared its ugly head, and I won't dwell on that, just so know it was targeting anti-war hippies and blacks. So became highly illegal, felony to own it. Research became restricted to only looking for harmful effects. So a lot of those 28,000 studies are only to look for the harmful effects, which is good and bad, because after 30 years of trying to prove that it causes lung cancer, we cannot. But it requires more approvals than any other study substance. In order to study this, you have to become temporarily deputized as a DEA agent to handle it. The one researcher in history, Dr. Sue Sisley, got approval to study it as an aid for treating PTSD. And it took her 6 years to get all the approvals she needed. The quality of the product that she got was horrible. It was this ground up mess that had been frozen for 2 years, and she had to have it tested just to make sure it was really cannabis. So we're kind of stuck in this spin cycle. It doesn't matter how much scientific studies we throw at the DEA, because it has to be accepted by the FDA for the DEA to change that. We get in this cycle where nothing can happen. Many, many other countries have medical programs or have legalized it completely. The first medical marijuana program, or cannabis program, in the United States was and is, it's still in effect, a federal program called the Investigational New Drug Program. It started in 1978. A patient was arrested, and his doctor pled for him an argument for compassionate use. And so the federal government set up this program, and in which they provide 300 rolled marijuana cigarettes to the patients each month. So the daily dose the government recommends is 10 a day. It's not quality product, but they should. It seems to have worked for the patients and not harmed them. There was a total of 15 patients enrolled. There are 4 alive. I've had the pleasure of working with them, alongside them, in protesting in front of the United Nations building to change drug policy. The first state medical cannabis programs were also based on that same compassionate use argument. First one in California in 1996. That was by voter initiative, which Hawaii does not have. And they now serve over 758,000 patients. Hawaii became the first state to do it through the legislative process because that's the only way that anything can get done in Hawaii is through the legislative process. We now have 29 states plus Guam and DC who have medical programs, 16 states that have CBD only or some variation of that. So we have a total of about 45 states that do recognize some medical use for cannabis. And we're hoping to get the state of Hawaii to recognize that it needs to come out of the Schedule I drug category on a state level. Oh, prize. How many medical cannabis patients do we have in Hawaii? Where's the prize? So, more than 18,000?
30,000. 24,000.
Yes.
22,000.
It's close.
22,000. 22,000.
It's 19. Yes, got it. He gets a prize. Yep.
We're expecting that number to grow now that we've got dispensaries in place that have quality products. We've got more conditions that we're adding to the list, and everybody is learning more about this medicine and how it works. Patients are going to be asking healthcare providers, and so that's why I'm passionate about trying to teach healthcare providers about how their own bodies work and how the medicine works. So, because right now the patients know more than we do, and that's not fair or right. And so we're going to have more hospice and pediatric patients taking advantage of the quality products. So patients face many, many barriers. They're discriminated against more than any other patient. You are pretty much on your own for dosing. We're turning patients to the over-the-counter CBD oils instead of using the whole plant medicine. You can't use it in public settings. You can't use it, children may not be able to go to school because they can't use their medicine at school. The Drug Policy Forum has worked on many of these issues. We're working on employment issues. We're working on housing and that type of thing. We tried to get hospitals to create a special medication room, and we failed on that. But we'll continue working on doing that. But mostly the problem has been because it has shut down research. And I did mention this already, that the Department of Health and Human Services, the United States government, has a patent on CBD as a neuroprotective agent, so limiting stroke, trauma, or damage from stroke, and treatment of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, HIV. And this was confirmed in a 2015 study done on mice. And like I said, NFL is hugely interested in conducting research on that. The best research we have was reviewed, and there was a summary that came out in January of this year reviewing over 10,000 studies to find out what we have substantial evidence for and what we do not. So what we do have some substantial evidence for is chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, spasticity, and control of nausea. We do have some evidence that is useful in improving sleep disorders. But if you notice down here, there's not enough evidence to say that it's effective for treating epilepsy. But this was done before the Epidiolex studies that just came out too, showing that it might have some usefulness. It's 100% CBD-based liquid, and it could be available on the market within the next year or two. The drug companies, though, did hire lobbyists this year to try to get a monopoly on CBD oils. They hired lobbyists in about, I think it was 18 or 20 states, so that they would change the schedule to a different drug schedule that can be prescribed, and it would only be legal for that. And so all of the stuff that you can buy over the counter now, it will be wiped out and illegal. This epilepsy study on Epidiolex, they used different doses for it, but after 3 months, they had some pretty decent results. 45% of all patients saw more than, it's 50% reduction, sorry, and 9% were seizure-free. In 62% of the Dravet syndrome patients had a reduction in frequency, and 13% of those were seizure-free, and another 71% saw a reduction in the Lennox-Gastaut type. So, but a lot of these patients had adverse events. Remember, I told you how it can affect other drugs in your liver, and so they had altered liver enzymes, and one doctor who reviewed this said he thinks possibly because of the dosing that they used was too high, that 25 milligrams per kilogram a day was too much. And it's also in a sesame oil base, and so some of the kids or some of the patients got diarrhea and again, maybe because of just too much oil being administered. So there are over about 300 studies showing that it does work for chronic pain management and hard to treat neuropathic pain. There are also 20 clinical trials showing that whole plant medicines are superior to it. And patients, the surveys of patients come back overwhelmingly saying they prefer whole plant medicine to the Marinol or 100% THC. Because remember, with THC, you don't have the CBD to help buffer out those effects, so you can get all of the side effects. It is useful for treating some things, but patients prefer the whole plant medicine. This is more about the neuropathic pain. Another pain study showing that not only did it decrease pain, but it decreased side effects from other medications, and it improved quality of life, and reduced the amount of opioids that a patient might use by 64%, which is a very significant number. In animal models, the pain reduction was sometimes equivalent to codeine morphine, so it works synergistically with the opiates, making it more active, more effective, and also slowing down the building up of tolerance. That's a natural response to any medication, is building up a tolerance to it, but cannabis helps slow that down so that patients did not have to start taking higher and higher doses of it. So whole plant medicine being more effective. It also helps promote deep sleep, which is the most healing phase of sleep, so hugely important in pain management. In states that have medical cannabis programs in dispensaries, we saw a reduction in the opioid overdoses by almost 25% in the first year, and in some states it went down to 33%. In 2014, the American Journal of American Medical Association said, hey, look, they suggested that maybe medical marijuana could be part of policy aimed to prevent opioid overdose, but only if their studies were confirmed by another study. So here's a tidbit for you. We are 4%
Jesus.
of the world population, but we consume 80% of the world's narcotics. So I won't get into the obstacles to research any more than I already did, but we do need to remove those obstacles by getting it out of the Schedule I drug category. And we have growing support and a lot of support from healthcare professionals, from religious communities, from a growing number of people. And this is just the American Academy of Pediatrics, Academy of Neurology. But there are others. Epilepsy Foundation has made a statement saying all treatment options should be explored and available to patients, and we need to open up research. This year in Congress, there's a new group in town, and they're called the Congressional Cannabis Caucus, and there are about 24 bills in play right now that you might want to pay attention to if you're interested in helping change drug policy. But, and I can help steer you to how to maybe make some effective changes in drug policy. We need to do it both at a state level and a congressional level. But this is what I'm hoping that you you got from me today is just that it can be safe and effective medicine for treating epilepsy and pain, and possibly replacing more harmful substances. Maybe we can cut down on the opioid overdose deaths using cannabis. That it is preferable to using the isolated single synthetic substances, and it just needs to get out of that Schedule I drug category so that we can open up research, so that we can talk to our patients about dosing, so that we can help our patients use the medicine better. And I do have some resources for you, a handout with, and if you email me, I can send you that, and then you can click on the links instead of just trying to type it out or figure out how to get there from the printed version. If you'd like to get involved, please do sign up for the Medical Cannabis Coalition's newsletter. The legislative session starts in the third week of January and goes through the first week of May. And we'll keep you posted on what bills that we're following and what we think about them and what we would like you to weigh in and say about them. And please let people in Congress know that you support descheduling it, not just rescheduling it, but rescheduling it. If you want to host a talk story or learn more about it, I'm happy to give my presentation. I don't charge for it. I just feel the information is so important to get out that if you put together a group of 4 or more people who will hold still for an hour and a half and maybe feed me, that'd be good too. But and also, if you're feeling inclined, please donate to the Drug Policy Forum. Every amount is helpful to us. We're a nonprofit organization. And if you want to learn more, tune in every Monday morning at 10:30 to KTUH and listen to Cannabis Nurse Wendy give you the cannabis news. And I try to include dispensary news. I try to include what's happening locally and nationally. And that's it.